say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. O'er the ramparts we watched, were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
I'm not going to sing this prayer. Let us pray. Ever-present God, whose love and mercy is always with us, let us draw close to you during this Lenten season. Be our strength and our hope. Give us grace to live this day and this week in the calm, knowing that you are caring for us each and every moment. As we draw close to you, make us aware of the need to confess and forsake all our sinful ways. Give us the strength and encouragement to walk as innocent children, trusting and relying on you to direct, support, and uphold us. Give us the spirit of forgiveness, the joy of loving, and the satisfaction of accomplishment as we endeavor to know you as the only God. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jennifer and Charlie. Please be seated. One last request. If you are a veteran of the Vietnam conflict, please stand to be recognized. My father and my father are those veterans and nothing more fortunate than having you, gentlemen. Thank you. Who are we, our 100/200 vets who give a damn? We're simple. We're a local group of community members. Many of us are in the military. Some of us were in previous lives. But all of us care passionately about making a difference. And our targeted audience are those smaller charities who are not able to make the big breakthroughs but can make one step forward with our local veterans and their families. And we've done an amazing job. What have we accomplished? In fourth quarter of 2022, we raised over $10,000 to some amazing charities. Captain Joey Johnson is the back. He was a recipient of $4,000 that went directly to his charity, where he helps young veterans achieve their goals of becoming commercial pilots. I'm glad you're here, Joey. Thanks for showing your support. Since our inception 7 years ago, we have raised over $178,000. That is not insignificant, that is huge. And the proudest statistic that I can say is that every single dollar has gone directly to the charities in need. We don't accept $1. We don't do pass-throughs. We don't have employees. We are all volunteers who make this happen. But we couldn't make it happen without our amazing sponsors. And specifically, Fort Worth Air Power Foundation and American Airlines have been with us from the very, very beginning and have helped us make a huge difference. You've seen this slide before, but you haven't had the privilege of getting to meet the people behind them. My friend Sid Epps, the chairman of the Fort Worth Air Power Foundation, couldn't be with us tonight. However, our vice chairman, Jim Darwin, is here. Please stand. Our secretary treasurer, Ms. Wanda Cox, is here. Please stand. Since 1958, the Air Power Foundation has been dedicated to assisting our military service members and their families. At first, it started just with Carswell Air Force Base, now the JRB Fort Worth. Now they offer numerous programs across the nation, including their role as a principal sponsor for our humble gathering tonight. Thank you, Wanda and Jim, for all the difference that you're making. I have to be honest and say that I'm an employee of American Airlines, but I'm a proud employee of American Airlines. I didn't come to American because of their fleet plan, the growth opportunities, or their balance sheet. I came here because I like the color of the airplane. But tonight, I'm happy to introduce Mr. David Seymour, our Chief Operating Officer and a proud Army veteran.
Thank you, Neil. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. These are always phenomenal events. I know last year I missed a couple of them, but when I first found out about the 100 vets that give a damn, it was something that was always going to be situated in my calendar, making it here. And I just love what they do. Love hearing about all the great charities that come before us. So it's really great. So first off, I want to thank them for their incredible work. This is really, I think for a lot of the charities, and what I really like about it, the charities that we have given to you, I mean, within days you're getting thank you notes for them because they are that appreciative of the work that this group does to help them out. Honored to be here this evening, and it's an honor, I think, for America to be able to sponsor tonight's fundraiser here, as well as, and I'm going to put in a plug for some future events that we're going to have coming up here to help support the POW anniversary coming up. My boss, our CEO, Robert Ison's son, is a third year at Naval Academy, and he's working through the Naval Academy Parents Association, or Alumni Association, to present a film screening in April on a movie that's going to highlight POWs. It's going to be, right now we're working through the mechanics, but I think it's going to be in our new hospitality center here at Skyview 6. Another opportunity to raise funds and support our POWs who have this anniversary coming up. But the other one is, as Neil talked about, the things that American does. And that is right now we're working to actively raise, or to provide the funding through Miles to move 170 POWs and their guests to the 50th anniversary in California this May. And that's going to be nearly 20 million miles that we're going to use to provide the transportation to get folks to and from. And that's something that, again, American does. We don't spend a lot of time advertising for those that are familiar with this. We do it because our team members, our crew members, all of our employees really enjoy doing this. It's their passion. That, I think, is another reason that I'm so proud of working for American, is that passion that our team members have towards the military and veteran and all the support that they get. So again, we want to honor the bravery sacrifice that our service members and our veterans make every day. And so again, this is just a small slice of the things that we do. I could spend a whole presentation talking about all the great things that our team members do to support. As a veteran myself, again, I'm always proud of opportunities to come and give back like this and be a part of this. And I'm really interested in hearing from you, Captain Alvarez, on your experience there. Because there's a lot. My father was a two-time Vietnam tours in Vietnam, and the one thing he did with me growing up, spent a lot of time talking about the war, and I've always wanted to know more about it. So I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say and your experience and all that. So I will finish up and I will pass it back. But again, thank you very much, everybody, for coming and being a part of this. You being here really makes these events a success and makes this organization a success in what they do. So thank you very much and have a good evening.
I want to take you back exactly 50 years to February of 1973. The average income in America was $12,900 per year. The cost of a new home was $32,500 a year. The gas crisis was yet to come. A gallon of leaded fuel cost 39 cents. The Concorde first crosses the Atlantic Ocean and cuts the travel time from New York to London in half. American Airlines ordered 6. The first mobile phone is introduced by Motorola in New York City. And after 9 years of construction, the first tower of the World Trade Center opened in New York City. It will fall 28 years later in only 102 months. All of that was overshadowed, and that the first of 591 American POWs returned with honor and came home. Please, a round of applause. In honor of that momentous occasion, President Nixon and the White House staff hosted a formal dinner for these heroes and their families. In his words, to honor their courage and most of all their commitment to our nation and her people. I have a video here, it's 6 minutes long, that tells a much better story of that event than what I can provide. But can you imagine the welcome home, the emotions of men who've been in captivity, some up to 9 years, as they returned on that freedom bird back to the United States? Can you imagine that public address on board the airplane when that young major in the Air Force aircraft commander came across and said, "Gentlemen, we have exited the airspace of North Vietnam." Commander Everett, I can't wait to hear your story tonight about that day. Here's a short video that talks about
Those are the last known American prisoners of war. That part of the Vietnam tragedy is over.
It was 1973. 590 American POWs were finally coming home.
Courage is fear that has said its prayers.
Courage is not always near the end of the fight. Courage is a process.
Everett Alvarez was the first American shot down in Vietnam. He was beaten and tortured. How long did you spend in captivity?
A total of 8.5 years. We had a code. It was return of an honor, our dignity, our reputation, our character. That brought us through.
John Borling was locked up with him in what became known as the Hanoi Hilton. They were both tortured.
We maintained that we wouldn't give anything for free. So the thing was, do the best you can, make them hurt you and hurt you bad, and then bend but don't break.
A lot of people only have 5 or 6 friends that they can really count on in a tough situation. But we had 300 friends that we knew to take not just death for each other, but torture for each other. Torture is much harder to take than death.
Colonel Ellis, who says they got on the plane, he was handed a big cigar and hugged a nurse.
We have not seen a woman in 5.5 years. Can you imagine that?
I bounded up the stairs and stopped at the top. Blow with this.
And Captain Gruders, who seemed so subdued on the flight home, soared in a dance of joy at the sight of his little brother all grown up.
The son of a gun is stronger than I am.
And then these wild rumors started circulating that there was going to be a dinner at the White House.
Here in this town on the back lawn of the White House, more than 1,200 people will dine with the Nixons. A giant tent was installed on the south lawn. President Nixon invited every Vietnam POW. It remains the largest dinner ever held at the White House.
Never has the White House been more proud than it is tonight because of the guests we have tonight.
It was huge.
Lots of celebrities.
Lots of celebrities.
Who did you see?
Well, I sat with John Wayne, got our team, and I thought, oh, man, this is it. I'm sitting with the dude, my hero, you know.
President Nixon made us feel like we were the stars.
Robert Certain spent three months in a North Vietnamese prison with Al Agnew.
So he brought us home. He ended the war. President Nixon is one of our heroes.
In a more serious moment, every POW met the president. You had a moment with the president. What did you say to him? What did he say to you?
He said something really interesting. He said, I tried. I really tried.
Did that mean he tried to get you home?
He tried to get us home.
There's no diminution of our affection for Richard Nixon. For us, he was a guy that stuck with us.
In 1973, President Nixon saluted nearly 600 American troops. They had been held as prisoners of war in Vietnam. After their release, they were treated to an unforgettable celebration. And now, 40 years later, many of those former POWs are reuniting.
Former POWs from the Vietnam War gathered today for a reunion at the Richard Nixon Presidential Library in California. They spent years in North Vietnamese prisons and were finally released in 1973.
There was an emotional reunion taking place at the Richard Nixon Library. Hundreds of former POWs from the Vietnam War gathered to commemorate a star-studded dinner that took place at the White House 40 years ago.
happened today in Southern California at the Richard Nixon Presidential Library.
Now, this was a very special day with a lot of historical context, as you'll see in a moment. These POWs came from all over the country to be here today, and many more people came out to salute them. It was a hero's welcome that these heroes were worthy of.
When I saw the people holding flags, I still get goosebumps.
They've been slowed by time, their numbers dwindling. Though many reunited at the Nixon Library were propelled to immortal lives by their rescue 40 years ago, they never lost their bond with each other, or with the president, as controversial as the war itself, to negotiate their freedom on the way to complete their war. Following 7 years in a Hanoi prison, Chuck Boyd went on to earn 4 stars as an Air Force general. Mr. Nixon, this week, he and nearly a third of the 591 POWs granted the unexpected gift of freedom 4 decades ago were invited to remember how it tasted, how their loved ones rejoiced at their release, how unbelievable it felt to leave their prison hellhole alive.
You never lost faith in America, and my father never lost faith in you.
In prison, they wrote down songs about America on toilet paper. They hid it from the Vietnamese. And 40 years ago, they sang one of them, written in prison. It is called the POW Prayer, about honor and freedom.
4 decades older and unrehearsed, choir members sang the words they learned long ago when they were far from hope and far from home.
Goosebumps indeed. Now, the reason why you're here, to hear firsthand about that journey, I'd like to introduce your and my favorite Marine, Mitch Taco Bell.
Guys, you all can hear me? No problem, no problem. All right, listen, it's such an honor to be here for the 3rd iteration of our guest speakers. For veterans, especially military, these are the giants. All of you Vietnam vets, World War II vets, you guys are the giants that we stand on your shoulders. And for that, I can't thank you enough. It really means the world to all of us. And to have the Honorable Commander Alvarez with us tonight. Sir, if you can come up here, let's start this up. We'll make sure we get you done.
Sounds good.
All right. Let's see. Is it on? Yes. Say it again.
Can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
Nobody can hear me.
Better now. There we go. All right.
Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
Sir, this is a hell of an honor. To go and start this whole presentation, it made me think about a lot of things. And one of them was, as a young lieutenant, first lieutenant, in SEER school. And if you guys don't know SEER school, Survival, Evasion, Rescue, it's a week of getting beat up and treated like you were captured by the enemy. Now, all of the stuff that they did, it's top secret. I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. The planning that goes into this was all based off of the treatment that Commander Alvarez received. And so, as I sit back and I think about it, what really frightens me the most is in August, when you were shot down in 1964, and I saw a presentation where you were in front of the Vietnamese and you're giving them name, rank, serial number, everything that we were trained to do. And then you go, I'm a POW, and the guy goes, no, you're not. The United States hasn't declared war on our country of Vietnam. That makes you a criminal of war. Oh my God. when you're a criminal war, they do anything they want to you, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, when you got shut down, let's go back to August of 1964. How many missions had you flown into North Vietnam at this point?
Into North Vietnam, actually, the day I was shot down, I was on my second mission. The first mission was the night before, where they had the incident. It's known as the Tonkin Gulf incident, when our two destroyers, the USS Maddox and the Turner Joy, were attacked by North Vietnamese torpedo boats out in the high seas. And that became very controversial. I was one of the planes that flew over that night. We went to the assistance of our destroyers, and I was the plane that was carrying flares that lit up the whole sky. And actually, I really saw nothing but our two destroyers. It was very difficult because it was a stormy night. And another fellow that was in the air controlling the planes that were over the two destroyers was a fellow named Jim Stockdale, who had been off the USS Ticonderoga. I had met him a few weeks before that. And so it was coincidental that we were both in the air at the same time. And then I had to leave the scene. I was low state. I had to get back to my ship, was a Constellation. It was quite an evening. We got back about 1 a.m. from that flight, and the admiral briefed us that was on the ship. And to his consternation, he wanted a report, a debrief on what happened. None of us saw anything except our two destroyers. There could have been a lot of ships out there. Subsequently, I had a letter from a fellow that was on the ship, one of the destroyers, who said they attacked initially, but then they retreated. And after that, there was a lot of turmoil. So it's still rather cloudy, controversial as to what actually happened. But the next morning, we were called in to brief a flight, and that was to plan our raids into North Vietnam, which was the first time we went in there. So I was shot down on my second mission into North Vietnam.
Well, let's go back to the night before.
Yeah.
So when you got back, how amped up are you on the adrenaline from the first? I mean, you practice a lot, but this is the first time.
Well, when you're coming back and you're low state and you have enough fuel for one pass and there was no tanker to refuel you, it was a little bit concerning, but I have to just say that we had so much training. And as a young naval aviator, we're so confident in our abilities. And to be honest with you, was back at the ship, the sea was pretty smooth. So as long as you have those factors, I think that I felt pretty confident I was going to get back on. And first pass, I only had a chance to make one pass, which I did. And
But were you guys all as young JOs amped up down in the ready room, high-fiving?
well, there were only three of us that went back up that night.
Oh, just three.
And I don't know about getting amped up. I don't know what that means.
Adrenaline dump from first combat.
Oh yeah, definitely. Hard to sleep that night. Yeah, but it's something that, looking back, it's just a series of events that you just take it all in and do what you do.
Right. So the second day, now you get the mission planning.
Right.
They tell you what you're going to look for and what you're going to do.
Right.
What were your thoughts on that? Are you guys crazy?
Holy cow, I said, here we go again, because every time we plan a mission to go, I either Laos back in those days or what have you, at the last minute, they always scrubbed it. So I figured, okay, they're going to scrub this one. But then, interesting thing happened. As we're planning the mission, it's about 1100 in the morning, so it's 2300 back to Washington, D.C., 12-hour difference. So we're planning for a 1400, that's 2 p.m. for Air Force guys.
Shut out! Fire for effect!
So we're planning for a 1,400 launch. And about 1,100, we're planning there. The air group commander walks in, he says, this time it's a go. You guys are going to go. This is the guy from our ship. And so he said, President Johnson just got on the air and announced that we're striking North Vietnam. In retrospect, he was right because the planes from the Ticonderoga had launched earlier and had struck targets on the southern part of on the coast of North Vietnam. Our targets were way up north of Hai Phong.
Right.
So we had a long way to go. So by the time we launched and we got over target about 1,600, they were ready. They were really ready for us. And we didn't have much intelligence. We found out that we were looking at high altitude charts of the target area of the coast. And the only thing that they told us in terms of intelligence was, well, look for boats around here, and you might see some anti-aircraft flag. You might see something around there, around the port. So when we hit the target of Han Gay, which was a torpedo boat base north of Hai Phong, I was flying waiting on the executive officer, and the rest of them went back. I sort of hung back. We went in, and the whole world opened up on us.
What were they shooting at you?
They were shooting from all over the place. The whole sky turned black, just with the flag, which was typical when it was heavily defended. At that time, we had no clue. So he didn't fire his weaponry, and he just he pulled off. I fired. There were about 6 torpedo boats lined up, and as we circled around, all of the fire was directed on us, and then behind here comes the other guys, and they did good work. I think they hit just about every torpedo boat that was tied up there. Quick thing, years later, I found out that as I said, the high altitude charts that we were looking at in those days, turns out they were about a year old. And so I learned that the day before we launched, they sent another high altitude plane over to get more photographs, which they did, but the photos went to Washington, D.C. So we launched. I found out that the new photos arrived back at the ship the day after I was shot down, and they showed a lot of artillery attachments and what happened. People asked me, well, what about, when you're shot down, how about your radio? We were not issued radios because this was all to us. We didn't have it.
Did you have a 38 or?
I had a 38. We had a 38, mostly used for flares when you're up, and if you happen to be out there, you could use live ammo, but we mostly use flares.
Out of a 38?
Yeah, little tracers that go really good, especially at night. So it was coincidental. It was amazing that here's what happened. President Johnson said, we're coming, and they were ready, and we didn't know all of the defenses that they had.
Well, take us back. You're in the cockpit of an A4, and for those that don't know, the A4 is a little sports car of jets. Has about 720 degree roll rate. First time I flew in one, the guy goes, hey, this thing's got a 720 degree roll rate? And I go, no. He goes, watch this. Hold my beer. Bam! Your helmet gets bounced around. And anyway, it's a sports car of little airplanes. And so the cockpit of this thing is very, very compact. And of course, we have a ejection seat in front of us. This is not from an A4, but it's from an F-100, just to give you an idea. And so take us back. You're in the comfort cocoon of your nice ejection seat, nice working airplane, and what happens?
Well, we didn't have a beer with us. So, as I pulled off and the fellows that were following, fired their ordnance, they pulled off. I'm flying wing on the executive officer. And if you watch the Top Gun, a wingman always sticks with his leader.
Right.
So he went back in, and I went with him. And he fired his ordnance on his second pass. I had 20 millimeter, just to do some strafing. And that was when I got hit. And it was basically just like that. I mean, the whole, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Like that?
Yes, sir.
My big ears sort of has a problem here. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So my big, when I got hit, I mean, it just boom like that you could, every emergency came on, smoke came in the cockpit, the lights were flashing red. I could feel something happening with my wing because I couldn't control anything. So my first thought was, okay, I gotta, because I was treetop level, coming out. And so my only thought was to get up, get altitude. If I had to eject, I was going to get some altitude. But I quickly realized that I wasn't going to go very far. I had no control. My plane started to roll, and I thought, oh my God, if I can't get it so I can eject or not, I'm not going to make it. And if I wait, I'm definitely not going to make it. So I had broadcast to the others that I was hit, and I was getting out, and the ops officer, Lieutenant Commander John Nicholson, who was later the captain of the Ranger carrier, was our ops officer. He was flying in our group, and I said, look, basically I'm hit, and I'm on fire, and he basically said, well, you know what to do. And I said, right, see you guys later, and I went out. Pulled my face curtain. I think I went out in that direction, but it was hard to tell. I was at the thought I had was, my goodness, if I wait, I'm not going to make it. And if I go now, maybe I will survive. Maybe I'll survive. Well, as I went out, it was not, I felt the chute pop. I sort of grayed out, but then I felt the chute pop. And within 2 seconds, 3 seconds, I was in the water. So
but everything worked as advertised.
Everything worked as advertised. And
Did you get hurt or damaged on the ejection?
Well, I was going a good, over 450 knots, I think, fast as I could go. And in checking everything, and trying to get my attitude right, I ejected everything I had on the wings, and we didn't carry much ordnance. We basically had 2 fuel tanks and that little A4. And by the way, sometimes the empty fuel tanks, we used to carry beer. We couldn't find lobster, I'm sorry about that. But anyway, so I was surprised that I was okay. Really, I was in the water, got rid of my helmet. We used to have the oxygen mask attached to the front, so it was a little difficult getting that off. Had the parachute sort of around me. So I try not to panic, parachute, oxygen mask, all this stuff. And the rig pack rocket seat here that we had the seat pan, had our survival raft and what have you, it was attached to our G suit.
Right.
So all of that was sort of dragging me down in the water, and so I was trying to get all of that off of me. I managed to get everything off. The hardest part was getting that seat pack. And then I surfaced, and on the distance I could see some fishing boats. And I thought, oh my goodness, and so I was trying to get out to sea, get out that way. But the tide was taking me that way. And so after a while, I thought, okay, so I popped my Mae West of it, and I thought maybe if I just pull one cord instead of two,
They would see the big orange blow.
yeah, maybe I'd go up a little ways. It popped you right up. So they saw me and they came after me, and I'm trying to deflect my Mae West. And I felt something zing my elbow. And then I saw some more splashes, and they were firing at me from one of the fishing boats. There were about 6 people on it, there were about 4 rifles. And they came closer, they fired again, and they missed me. I knew they were not trying to hit me, they just warned me. But as they came close, I figured that some of these guys were more scared than I was. Because there was one young guy who was standing there with his finger was on the hand grenade, he had his finger in the pin, and he was shaking. And I figured, oh God, if that pin pulls, I was more concerned. But they circled around me, and then they hauled me aboard with ropes and tied me up, and then headed back. A little bit later, they transferred me to a torpedo boat, and it took me back to the base.
One that you hadn't shot.
One that we had not destroyed, right, exactly. And that began a long journey as a POW. Well, I thought it was a POW, they always felt, like you said, that since there was no war, there was no declaration of war from the United States, there were no relations, and I was just a criminal, I was gonna be tried and by a tribunal.
And hung or shot.
Hung or executed, yeah. Figured.
Well, you're the very first guy.
Right.
So they don't have a real roadmap on how to torture people. What did they do?
Well,
start out with?
they do. They did. Yes, because don't forget, these people had been, fought the French in that war, and they had been captured by the French. And so they knew how to do those things. And if you look at their history, they had also had, served around in long periods of time, as captives.
Right.
And they've gone through hardships, what have you. As one of the fellows there, John Morning, said, it was medieval torture.
Yeah.
The tactics that they do. And so they've been doing that for quite a while.
I didn't even think about that. I mean, I was just sitting there thinking, you're the very first guy.
I was the first guy.
And they got you, and they're just like, okay, what do we do with this guy now?
Well, actually, you know what? It was interesting because they really didn't know. The local people didn't know, they had been, they had been warned, obviously, that we were coming, but when the people that captured me didn't know what I was. And they're yelling at me in Vietnamese, and here I am, a young kid. And so I figured don't ask me why, but I started talking to them in Spanish. Like, no, honest to God, and people, well, why'd you do that? I haven't. It was a good idea at the time.
And how long did it take before you convinced them? They figured out you were a Spanish exchange officer.
When they went through my stuff and they came up with my ID and my dog tags. And then they had a fellow that came aboard after that, and he obviously spoke English, and he saw that, and he says, American. Yeah, okay, you got me.
So the first camp, Hanoi Hilton wasn't built overnight. Where did they first put you as a POW?
Well, the first night, through the stress of the ejection and what have you, and as the shock started to wear off that evening, I was in a local village in a building, and everybody was looking in, coming by and looking in, and then every once in a while, the Vietnamese would bring a photographer, and they always took pictures. They would stand on the table and have you look down so that you were, for effect. They were always looking down at you, and you were subservient in some manner. So a lot of people taking pictures, what have you. But then finally, they took me to a local jail. And by this time, as I went in, there was a cell, and it was just mostly platform with with leg irons on the bar at one end. There were 2 Vietnamese prisoners in there, and they put the leg irons on me, and at that point I collapsed, and I woke up, gosh, I don't remember, middle of the night, and the 2 Vietnamese prisoners were sleeping on either side of me, and I had a mosquito net over. So I passed out again, and next day I wake up, and the Vietnamese prisoners have taken my net down. And one of them speaking English, he says, "You have to go with the officer here." I said, "Who are you?"
The guy that was sleeping with you?
Yeah, and he spoke English. And his name was Mr. C. He translated to Mr. C, and he spoke very good English. And he said he'd been there 5 years. I thought, God, and then, I'm sorry, 3 years. And the other fellow who didn't speak English had been there 5 years. And so I thought, holy smokes, but they had, just one, had a big window with bars. You could see and hear all the broadcast of the speakers and outside the walls and what have you. And I had my first interview. They took me up to another building, and there were 2 officers, a naval officer and an Army officer, and they spoke English. And that's when they told me there was no war. Name, rank, service number, date of birth. And they started asking me questions, and I said, I can't answer that. I can't answer. And that's what I did for the first week. After the first night, they moved me in the middle of the second night. They took me out, they moved me to a farmhouse of some nature, kept me locked up in a building, and the guards would come and see the interrogators. Later they were interrogators, they were just English-speaking officers that come and see me. And I was always just name, rank, service number, and date of birth. Are you hurt? Well, yeah. my back hurts, my legs hurt, so forth. But the bottom line was that, I tried to follow the rules. And then one night, middle of the night, the officer walks in and he's yelling and he says, all you want to do is tell us a name, rank, service number, and date of birth. He says, but look, and he started pulling out from his packet. He had the U.S. News and World Report, Time Magazine, Newsweek Magazine, San Jose Mercury News, San Francisco Chronicle, everything in New York Times. He said, look, and my pictures all over these things, my family's picture, my parents, everything, and my wife's at the time. And everything was just there, and they said, so we know about you. I said, yeah.
Why do you ask them?
So what do I do now, right?
Yeah.
And so that, and gradually, I just developed a strategy that if I didn't think that they could know anything, I would find it difficult. I would just make it difficult to answer. But if I figured they knew things, then I would say, yeah, I talk about things. But the whole key was that they just wanted to get you to talk, what happened. And that night, that next early in the morning, as they packed me into a Jeep, took me to Hanoi. And I walked into the old prison, it's called the Hoa Lo in Vietnamese. That means fiery furnace in Vietnamese. And that's the one that we nicknamed the Hanoi Hill.
Right.
Yeah. So I spent, the rest of my Vietnamese POW career in and out the Hanoi Hill.
And did you end up learning a lot of Vietnamese?
That I learned?
Did you learn a lot of Vietnamese? Or did you?
I started to, but then when I would try to say some things, if I didn't say it correctly, that I would get punished. And so this is when the things started getting rougher. And I finally said, okay, forget that.
Yeah. Yeah. So how long were you there before you finally had a buddy to hang out with? Somebody else?
Well, I was shot down August 5th, The next raid in North Vietnam where somebody was shot down was in February 65. 6 months later, they shot down a fellow named Bob Shoemaker, later retired admiral. And Bob was brought into the camp, but we weren't together. And they kept me separate. Then the others that came along were kept in separate areas. And they started putting these fellows together, but they kept me separate. And they finally, I spent 6 months in a little 7-foot by 7-foot cell in a section that they called Little Vegas. Later on, we named it. And it wasn't until the Vietnamese discovered that I knew that there were other Americans there, POWs, that that's when they put me in one night with them. So in total, I was by myself 13 months and 8 days.
Solitary confinement.
Oh, yeah, so without contact with anybody. Yeah.
How did you combat that? I mean, what kind of stuff would you dream about and think about?
You gotta dream. A lot of stuff, just make up things and dream about it. And, you know, it was basically two different battles: physical battle and mental battle. Physical was probably the easiest because you just did what you could, but mentally it was tough. And it was just a matter of conditioning. You know, everything I did was just, I didn't have psychology. I was an electrical engineer. I was not a medical person or what have you, but everything that I undertook was just common sense. I figured, okay, this is what I got to do. And spirituality had a lot to do with my spirituality. I gave a talk about a year and a half ago, a graduation with a group. And I have done quite a number of graduations. These were not, this was a graduate school level things. And I always bring up, in some manner, the spirituality of captivity. And by the way, I have been discouraged to bring up God, by when you give a public school, like a public school. And so I don't do much if I can't talk about God. So I'd given this graduation speech. And at the conclusion, people would come up and take pictures, what have you. And I found myself facing this lady who had walked up, and she said, "I bet you talked to Jesus." And without blinking an eye, I said, "Every day."
Right.
So that, the combination of a commitment to hang on to my values, things that, to my country, to my community, to my family, to my peers, and to God. I mean, this was basically what I had as a goal, a commitment to it.
Did you all have a SEER school that you went through prior
to
deploying? So there was a SEER school?
Oh, yeah, Navy had a SEER school outside of San Diego, California.
Okay. And did they come up with the TAP code prior to you?
No, sir.
You guys devised it?
Yeah, well, one of the fellows that came up was a fellow named, the fourth guy shot down. Fourth or fifth was Air Force Captain Smitty Harris. And Smitty's the guy that brought in the TAP code.
If you all don't know, the way to communicate between the cells was a TAP code, because you couldn't, I know that you guys could yell into, you would take a towel sometimes and yell into the wall to try to muffle it so the guards couldn't hear. But the TAP code, and it would take you down number 1, 3, and that would be a letter. And then, so it took a long time, you can imagine, to spell out the words, but these ingenious guys figured this out. Tell us about the TAP code.
Well, so when I joined the fellows, they Smitty was one of the guys already there, and they had passed it to each other. So I'm sitting there that first morning, and the fellows on the cell next to me, so I hear this. The It's a shave and a haircut. So what do you do?
2 bits.
Then they start tapping. I'm thinking, what are they doing? So then finally, they got word around, whispering and what have you, the 5x5 square, 5x5 squares, and the row and the column and all that stands for the alphabet. Oh, that's what they're doing. So then right away you start, at first, like you said, it's slow, but then if that's all you have to do all day, sometimes you just tap it away. Of course, you couldn't get caught, because if you were caught communicating, you broke the camp regulations. And if you broke the camp regulations, the camp commander got very angry, and then you were punished. And I'll tell you some of these punishments. But, it was important to keep that communication link going, because that was the key to our organization. And without that, we had no organization we couldn't keep together. And that was the whole point, was to remain united as a group and to present resistance to their propaganda efforts, to use us as propaganda tools. And so, it's interesting, once if you're fighting a war, you're using all the tools to fight. But if you're captured, you're no longer fighting the war. That way you're fighting it internally, resisting everything you can. You can't just succumb to everything they want. And that was their goal, is to get you to just succumb to everything that they wanted you to do. You were really, if you ever reached a point where you no longer had the will to resist, you basically lost your soul. And that's the way I looked at it. That's basically the way all of us came. So as a group, we had a goal, and that was to come home someday, but come home with our integrity, with our reputation, with our sense of honor. So our motto was return with honor. So that's what you saw the guys walking off. They did.
When it was at Sears School in Brunswick, Doug Paco was our guest speaker, and he came to our group as graduates. Now, Doug was a young seaman. You all know his story. He was a young seaman. He decided he wanted to go up to watch the fire for effect off his ship, and he got as high as he could, but when the 5-inch gun went off, it blew him into the water. Yeah. And Vietnamese fishing trawler grabbed this guy. Well, he I guess in Nebraska or someplace, and really tried to put the twang in it and come off as a bumbling, blah, 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 blah. And they thought he was retarded. They thought he was mentally slow. And what they call him, they had a nickname for him, Slow One or something.
Wow.
But
I think we have a name for him too.
But what was amazing to me was to hear another POW tell me a story about him and go, yeah, but because they thought he was worthless, they let him go out there and sweep in the yard. That was his job. But what he would do is he'd be walking around the camp, sweep, shh, 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 shh. So everybody within earshot that could hear this was getting the news, the hometown news from Doug as he was sweeping, and the Vietnamese never picked up on that. I just thought that was a brilliant thing. Did that?
Yeah, I that's true. But he was very intelligent, really.
Yeah.
But when we first heard over the camp radio, the propaganda radio, and they were talking, every night they blasted camp radios over. And they talked about this young kid that had fallen off a ship. And my cellmate at the time, Tom Barrett, and I looked at each other, and we fell off the ship. And we said, how do you fall off a ship? And so a couple of weeks later, our cell was in a position where you had a little crack in the door. You could look out towards the main gate of the complex we call the zoo, with all these buildings. And we're looking out, I'm looking out when a new guy comes out of this one shed, and this guy comes walking out, looking around. I said, Tom, here, take a look at that. Does he look dumb enough to fall off the shed? Yeah, that must be him. But then, so we're looking at it, I said, he's by himself, okay? And so we're watching him, and there was a hulk of a truck, a rusted old thing with no tires. And they used to let him out to sort of get sunlight or whatever, he could pick weeds. Just about. So the guard left him alone, and he's looking around, and he's getting dirt, he's putting it down the tank of his hulk. It's not going anywhere, but he sabotaging this. Yep, he's the guy that, then they moved him away and never saw him, but later on, yeah, he was with a fellow named Dick Stratton, and Dick's the one that made him, learn. We all had to memorize all the names of the guys, and so Doug Hegel did, and then he was the one that was encouraged, if he was offered early release, to go home.
I know he didn't want to.
He didn't want to, but Dick Stratton said, you go, in order. And so he did, and he came home, and he had all these names that a lot of them, families didn't know. They were POWs.
He'd memorize their names by Old MacDonald.
Yeah.
Old MacDonald had a farm.
Yeah. Very, very smart. I mean, he was smart. And I think, this was an act initially, yeah. I tried to speak Spanish. He had a better accent. Anyway.
As kids, we all watched Hogan's Heroes.
Yeah.
So our only idea of being a POW is in a comfy barracks and, Germans who slide the food and whatnot. Did you guys have particular nicknames for your guards?
Oh, yes. Half of them I cannot use here in public. But yeah, we did.
Spooky and...
they had all kinds of names. Owl. The one kid we had was called the Rabbit. He was an interrogator, an English-speaking officer. He was very nasty guy. I had no hatred for the Vietnamese people, but this guy, he was bad, and they did bad things to us. And then when we were released, there was a table there with a Vietnamese officer and an American officer sitting there, and they were comparing the list, and they would call the names off. That Vietnamese officer was the Rabbit. And I did a double take when I saw him. I said, gee, but I was convinced one of the guys was going to go over and touch him.
Yeah.
But no, they all just went ahead and came across the line and held our composure for that guy.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. I really can't. The facilities that you all had in reading, if you all haven't had a chance to read his book, I highly recommend go ahead, get on Amazon or used books, secondhand books here in Fort Worth. They can order it for you.
I like this one, not Amazon.
Yeah.
She orders them by the dozens. Yeah.
But when you start thinking about the facilities that you had to endure for 8.5 years, 8.5 years, just beyond belief. The little tiny bathroom with a hole, and you guys had to clean it, and I heard you guys.
That was luxury.
Oh, that?
Yeah.
Oh, the bucket. Oh, you would have the bucket.
Yeah, we had
with
bucket,
the sandals.
the bucket.
Sit on.
Interesting thing you said about this. You had a bucket. Usually they were really rusty in the cell, and that was it. You had a bucket, and so first time I would use it, I cringed at first, but then I got used to it. This and that. So when I got my first cellmates after about 1.5 years of sitting on this thing, he looks at me, my first cellmate. He says, "What's wrong with your shoes?" Well, what are you talking about? These rubber tire sandals.
Right.
He says, "Why don't you use them?" What are you talking about? He goes here. So he put his sandals on the lid and then sat on the sandals. Oh. That was smart. You know, the amazing thing about that, this was a fellow named Red Bird. He was a high school, and then joined the Air Force and became a fighter pilot, F-105 pilot. I was an electrical engineer. I had not figured this out.
Well, Leo Forsyth was a good friend of mine. And when I was talking to Leo one day, I said, what was the first thing you said to your wife when you got back? And he goes, you know what? I pondered that a lot. I had a lot of time to ponder that. And when I got off the airplane, I gave her a big hug and I said, hey, sorry, honey, I didn't call. I was a little tied up. And that was what he, honest to God, said to his wife. So what was the first thing that you said? I mean, you had time to think about this in offshoot moments of your life there. What was the first thing you said when you got back?
The first thing I said to whom?
Your wife.
Oh, no. By the time I got back, I was no longer married. It was one of those things where, I found out about a year and a half. Actually, it was a year. And that was pretty tough. But, they had used the fact that, you think she'll wait for you, think she'll wait. Well, she didn't. But you know what? I had a dream, and it was for a really long time. That's what I hung on to. So it hit me pretty hard. And as it was pointed out, I had some very good cellmates that hung in. There was a fellow named Jerry Coffey who was later in our wedding, and Jerry was the one that walked me through that. We would help each other as things got tough. If you were physically sick, you helped your buddy. If you were injured, you helped your friend. You helped them go on. We were going to come out of that together. And so Jerry we went through that one again. So when I came home, I had really gotten over that shock. We landed at Clark Air Force Base, came off the airplane, and I was in the first group. The picture you saw was, I think, the third group of that. The guys in the air. I was in the first group, walked off after Jeremiah Denton, and then we went in the hospital at Clark Air Force Base, the Philippines. I had looked forward to a great meal.
Right.
For the whole day, I said, you know what, I'm not going to eat. I'm going to save my appetite. And so I did. We got out that afternoon, got to the hospital, and so before they let us eat, they give us a quick exam, And most of us had parasites, other things like that. So the doctors said, well, better give you a bland diet.
Well, you would throw it up. I mean, if you got back, you're going to toss after fish heads and rice balls.
Oh, yeah. Well, what was that again?
After fish heads and rice balls.
Oh, I couldn't find any fish heads. So anyway, I had been planning on having a steak and eggs,
right,
milkshake, French fries. So I was saving my appetite. So the doctor says, we better put you on a bland diet. Well, okay. So I forget who was next to me. We went through the mess hall line and we got a little bland diet. Had a little bit of potatoes, peas, a little piece of meat, I think, I'm not sure. And we go sit down and I'm eating my bland diet. By the way, everything we're doing is we're sitting there about 3 or 4 docs.
Right.
So, medical doctor, psychiatrist, just watching everything we're doing. And, so do I. How can you eat when someone's like this watching? And so as I finish that, we're finishing. Here comes the next batch of guys coming through the line, and we looked up and they're having eggs and milkshakes and fried hamburgers. And I'm thinking, and I saw the guys and I said, he asked, I'm getting a doctor, you can't do that. I said, look, they can do it, I can do it, come on. And so we all got up, had steak, eggs, milkshake, french fries, etc. And they came back, and the doc said, well, I guess if you could hold it down. And we did.
You did? You did toss it?
Oh, no. No way. Anyway, so it was delicious.
Oh,
It was great. The other thing I did is I stood in the shower for about a good hour. And I just soaked myself and rinsed and soaked. It felt so good. A hot shower.
Did you watch the movie Castaway with Tom?
Yes.
When he got back into civilization, light switch on, off, sleeping on the floor. Did you have any experiences that were similar to that?
No.
Soft bed.
I've been a big failure. I have not lived up to expectations. I remember that first night, and by the way, they had cordoned off that whole floor. And only doctors and nurses couldn't go in there. And I was single. I was in heaven. It was great. And so I remember.
Sponge bath, please.
I can't sleep. My back hurts. Anyway, so I finally get to bed. We finally get to bed, and in this big, huge bay, there's just myself and another guy named Larry Corvino. Larry was one of the first persons I saw face to face. Years back. Anyway, and Larry's funny. And the bed had all these like curtain around it, And so I could hear his voice over there. So I wake up. Oh, the first thing they did is two nurses come and they want to take your temperature or whatever. I gotta tell you this story. Anyway, so they come and they take my temperature and they go over to Larry. And he's sleeping. Next thing I hear is, "Get away. Get away, damn it, I want to sleep." And next thing he shares, "If you don't get away, I'm going to bite you in the ass." And then I hear, "Ow!" I was Larry Garino.
Oh my God. Well, sir, this has been great. I got to open it up for some questions and see if anybody in the audience has a question that they would like to ask. Yes, sir.
Tell them the story about.
Say your name and.
Tell them the story about Joe
Bob Decker. I guess I just want to cut to the end of it all. What was the feeling in your part of prison you were in, if you were in Camp Unity, when the B-52s first came over Hanoi and you started hearing the bombs hit?
I missed that.
What was your feelings when the B-52 started the arc light over Hanoi?
Yeah, linebacker 2. It was known as linebacker 2.
Linebacker.
Yeah, I started. The bombing had stopped on Hanoi for almost 4 years when the peace talks started in Paris. But then things started to pick up, and May of '72 is when the bombing was resumed, and so they brought some of us back into the Hanoi Hilton. And we were in the Hanoi Hilton as the intensity. Oh, did I shut it off?
No, you're good.
Okay, great. And so as the intensity, as time went by, the intensity of the bombing increased to 52s. So that fall, I remember that they were really starting to pick up and come, and then there was the election. And the question was whether Nixon was going to be reelected or not. And by that time, most of us, a good number of us, felt that the only way we were going to get out of there was just to bomb the heck out of them.
Right.
And then we had an ingoing battle in there between the Hawks and the Doves. 80%, 90% of us were Hawks and 10% were Doves. And they figured, oh, this is never going to end. The Doves did. And so after we heard that through the camp radios that Nixon was reelected in 72. The doves, we get, oh no, 4 more years of this. And, but then the bombing really resumed. And I remember, they would hit pretty close to the prison, the Wallow, or the Hanoi Hilton. And and so what they did is we went out and got they had these long planks of about 2 inches thick, mahogany, 10 inches wide. And we all carried these things into the cell and propped it against the wall. Because if the bombs hit pretty close, some of these steel girders would come down on you. So every time there was an air raid, we'd have to go under these planks propped up, and and the building would shake some of the bombs came somewhat close, but never hit the prison.
Did they torture you all more after
No.
that?
Oh, no, that torturing stopped in 1969. It was after a year of peace talks, when the Vietnamese, I think, realized that we were going to be a very important piece of whatever negotiations there were, and we were going to have to come home. That's when they gradually started taking better care of us. Up until then, we were used as propaganda and punished all the time. So I was telling the accountant, the first time they really went after me, and I was the longest there, and others, was in late 1965, when they started pressuring for propaganda, and the last time was in the summer of 1969, was my last session where they were trying to get me to do propaganda. And I still have my jaw is dislocated right there. That's what happened in 69 when they, I think, broke my jaw. Well, with a rifle, but anyway. So, all those years was subject to propaganda and harsh treatment for most of us.
I wouldn't even bring up the whole Jane Fonda segment.
To answer the question, late 72 linebacker, I remember looking out one big window up there, which was just a small sector. And I counted that one night, 11 SAMs go up through that window. And can you imagine what was happening all around me? And then there would be a big flash, and you knew a 52 was hit. There would be a big flash. And the next day, this is how things were. There were survivors, air crew brought in on stretchers. That's how fast they were getting them and bringing them into the camp.
Yes, sir.
Joe Floyd, January 69 till August the 7th, I was a POW in Green, but I didn't get caught like you did. I just wanted to know if you got promoted. Whenever you got captured, you were a certain rank. When you got out 8.5 years later, did you get promoted like you should have been?
Yes, sir. I was due to get promoted in October of 64 from Lieutenant JG to Lieutenant 03. And what I found out later is that they would promote you on time. And so in 4 years, in 1968, I was promoted to Lieutenant Commander, and I came home as an 04 Lieutenant Commander.
But did they give you back pay?
Yeah.
Did you get back pay?
Well, okay. Here's the interesting part for my story. All my pay went to my former wife. And so the Navy was able to stop that a year and a half, almost 2 years before I came home. So I did have 2 years. But you know what? I'm the luckiest guy.
Yeah.
I came home, and again, I was looking forward to everything. I happened to be in Washington DC, and I was going to fly back to California and on a flight leaving out of Baltimore to San Francisco. I had a party that I was going to be going to in San Francisco. I said, I got to get back earlier. So they changed my flight to a flight that left at 9 o'clock or something like that out of Washington Dulles. And so I went down there and I met a person who handled the VIPs out of Dulles, and she's right there. If you got there, and then President Nixon had the White House dinner for the POWs, and our first date was the White House dinner. And they'll be celebrating 50 years of marriage this fall.
That is awesome. Hey guys, what a pickup line. Hey baby, hey Everett Alvarez, how would you like to go to the White House for a little dinner?
No, it was opposite.
What do you mean opposite?
It was opposite. She said to me, if you come into town, call me. I'll show you around. No, she said, I'll show you around the airport.
I told my so much at
Yes, sir. Commander, I was an A4 driver as well. VA 212 on the Hancock.
Oh, yeah.
Down in 70.
Yeah.
So it was November 21st, 1970. That's the first night of our second cruise. And they said, we're going north with flares off of Haiphong Harbor because the good guys are coming in from Thailand to break these guys out of the sandpapers.
Right.
How long did it take you to find out that we tried to get you guys out, but it didn't work?
It didn't take long. An interesting thing, because it's on raid, October 1970.
November 21st.
November 20th, yeah, sorry. So we were in this one camp, and interesting things, about 5 months before that, they had taken a lot of my cellmates and rearranged us, and they had moved them to a camp, which was, I forget the name of it, and there were about 50 guys out there. And then about 2 months before the raid, they had taken these 50 guys and they opened up another camp about 15 kilometers away, and they had brought in another one. So there were about 100 POWs in this other camp. The first camp was Sante.
Right.
The one that they moved into, these guys were like close to 100 guys. So when they had the Sante raid, the people came in, they came in right near or almost over the camp that had almost 100, and they hit Sante and it was empty. Had they known, they know that they came very close to the guys that were in this camp heard some of the planes, they heard the artillery, the fire going on. It was just 15 kilometers away. And so it was right after that they cleared out everybody except for this one camp where they were doing propaganda movies. And they filmed, the POWs getting Christmas dinner, quote, normal holiday dinners, food and everything. And as soon as the cameras went away, they packed everyone and they took us back to the Hanoi Hill, where for the first time we were all together in one camp, and we called it Camp Unity. It was a section of the Hanoi Hill. They had large cells of about 40 guys per cell. Some others were 20 guys, and that's the first time we really organized the wing, the POW wing. Gives you an idea of who the SRO was, right? It was a wing. And so I always say, then we had the organization, the schematic, and all the functions of people. So we had, senior officers and all the others, the logistics, supply, finance, all this, what have you. And I always tell people, when you put a bunch of senior officers together, they create a bureaucracy. and that's what we had. But it was, but the intent and the purpose was good, because that's the first, our motto was return with honor. And we had an artist, Jerry Coffey, who designed the logo and had everything ready so that when we came home, we were ready to formalize our group.
Did you know Bud Day?
I knew Bud Day very well. Bud Day was a sweetheart.
And Bud and I went to the same college up in Iowa, City.
And he was the only lawyer.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
From University of Southern.
Yeah. 100, and he's a Medal of Honor winner, Bud Day. Wonderful guy. Wonderful guy.
One more question. Oh, you can.
Hello. 1, 2, 3. Louis Selden, I believe you were an AVCAT, is that right? Did you have a degree when you got your wings?
I had, I came into as a aviation officer candidate with a 4-year degree.
Okay. Doesn't matter, that's not the question though. Sorry. I did look at your information on the internet today and then failed to read it before I came in. Can you comment on the rest of your Navy career or time in the Navy and what you did afterwards?
What did you do after you got back with the Navy, your career in the Navy? Did you continue on? Or?
Oh, yes. I got back, we got back in February. We were given, they were very generous for us. We were given, we were attached to a hospital for as long as we could, and we really had in and out privileges. I mean, we went all over the place. It was our base of operation, and after that, we were entitled to a certain amount, so many months of leave. Plus, you could take other leave you accumulated if you want to. You could take it, but I didn't. We were married in the end of October, and then I went. Our first assignment was refresher flight training in Kingsville, Texas. It was a program that was set up for us to get back in the cockpit and get a few hours. And then after that, I went to the postgraduate school in Monterey, 2-year, well, it was a 2-year curriculum that I turned into almost 3 years. Great golfing in Monterey. And then at the end of that, I came to Washington, D.C., NAVAIR at Pentagon. And I was there until and when I was there, I started going to law school at night at GW. I was assigned to what they call a class desk. It was, I was the deputy program manager for the A4, and I was the one that used to have to interplay with the manufacturer and the weapons suppliers and what have you. And every time I went somewhere, I had to take a contracts officer, contracts person, and I didn't know what they were talking about. So I went to law school to learn government contracts, basically. And 1 year turned, and then I retired, and President Reagan was elected right after that. I got to know President Reagan right after I got home, his staff, and they were very good to me. He was the governor of California, and his wife, Nancy. And so Nancy sort of adopted me. A lot of people adopted. Raquel Welch didn't. She didn't.
What's wrong with that?
But anyway, and I babysat for a little while in a ranch in Idaho, Ronnie Reagan, their son. So I went from there. We went to. I served in the Reagan administration. I was a number 2 at the Peace Corps for a year and a half. That's an interesting story. And then I was 4 years. I served as the deputy of the Veterans Administration. And number 2, I was acting VA director, head of the VA for twice. And then after that, I started in business, and I kept involved in politics. I worked with John McCain when he ran. He and I I was one of the first guys he traveled with. He started his first campaign to travel around the country and raise money. And by this time, I had been around Washington enough to know that every time I was asked to run for office, I said no, because I don't know how to ask for money. I'm not good at that.
Right.
And so, remember that tonight.
Real quick, when you got back to C.R. Smith, we have a whole wall of POWs who were pilots at American.
Yeah.
And I understand C.R. Smith went out of his way to say, if you are able and if you want, you have a job with American Airlines. Did you ever cross your mind to come fly for us? Or?
I never heard of that.
Oh, no.
So I didn't come to fly for American. I went to work for Reagan.
All right.
Okay. But anyway,
Things worked out good.
yeah. Listen, I've had a great life. We are having the movies, the films that you basically showed there with our 40th. This year, we're celebrating our 50th. It's our last big hurrah. And I look at these guys, and 2 years ago, they said, will you take over the organization? Because I'm on the board of Nixon Library Foundation, and I've been involved with a lot of the politicians and what have you. And so I said, okay. So we're having our 50th here in reunion. I'm surprised at the number of people a number of former POWs that are going to come. I thought some of them I didn't even know were still living, because there was, I figured, about 350 still living, and we're getting close. We had 177 signed up, plus there's 1,000. And you look at these guys, and these are the guys that when the camp commander said, yeah, you are not allowed to communicate, they developed TACO, the COVID code, so we could keep our, these are the guys that, when the camp commander said, use us for propaganda, they're the guys that said no, and we fought and resisted. So basically, I think that I'm very proud to be one of them, because these are the fellows that showed that it could be done.
Well, sir, you are the giant that we all stand on your shoulders, and I just want to say thank you.
We have time for one last question, and it's coming from your boss and therefore my boss.
There's so many stories. But the main story that on your homecoming was how Joe Cap.
Oh.
You have to tell them.
Oh, she wants me to tell a story about Joe Cap. Remember Joe Cap? Joe Cap was, he and I grew up together. We were the dearest of friends from the third grade, little kids growing up. And Joe Cap, when we got to college, was picked up by Cal Berkeley to be there, play football, and he was a quarterback for the University of California. And he went to Cal Berkeley, and I went to Santa Clara, and I used to go, and he was on the football team, and I'd go stay with the football team. And then after that, before school would start, his mother and my mother were good friends. When I went off and joined the Navy, he was drafted to play ball in Canada. And so then I go to Vietnam and I get shot down. Anyway, so years later, just before we were released, and we were living in this big part of the Hanoi Hilton, we made contact with some new fellows, new shoot downs that you could whisper down the back alley between the double walls and talk to them. So they would talk back and forth, and they were updating us on, what was new, sports cars, everything. And then on sports, they started talking one day about Maynard this and other guys, football players, and they mentioned Cap retiring, and I'm thinking, whoa, wait a minute, guys. Go back. Repeat that. Yeah, Joe Camp retired. My Joe Camp, you know, the guy? So I go back and forth, and finally says, yeah. He had taken the Minnesota to the Vikings to the Super Bowl in 1969. In 69 Super Bowl. And holy smokes, I had no clue. We come home, on story, back, a very emotional reunion with the family. I'm at Oakland Hospital, and the doctor says, comes in, they said, you know, everybody has to go home. Commander Alvarez has to get rest because he traveled that day from the Philippines. Got in there, and he says that he's going to have a big conference in the morning, so he has to get rest. Okay, so the family goes home. I go to bed. I'm sort of watching the news, falling asleep, and I hear this big commotion outside. And of course, you can't get in there unless only doctors and nurses, you know, Marines and Guardians. I hear this big commotion down the hall, and I hear this biggest thing I know, a guy standing on my doorway. And I look up, he flips the light on, he's got hair down to here, he's huge, it's Joe Camp. And he said, are you hurt? Are you okay? Are you hurt? And I'm looking at him, I'm saying, yeah. He says, are you sure? I said, yeah. He says, well then, come on, get up, get dressed. I said, where are we going? He said, we're going out, come on. And so I get dressed and put on the jacket. We go out of the hospital and we spend the whole night. I'm AWOL. I didn't realize till later that they had put out an alert looking for me. We were out all night in San Francisco, and finally I remember that it was daylight, and I said, Joe, I gotta get back to the hospital. That's the first night back. I said, I got a press conference. And so we're driving across the San Francisco Bridge to Oakland, and the sun's coming up, you know, and I'm thinking, oh God, you know, here I go again, just like in days we were flight training, going to beach parties in Florida and all that stuff. Anyway, and walk in to the hall, he drops me off. I walk in. And everybody goes, here he is, get dressed, go in a shower, stand in full shower, get ready for my first conference. That's what the story you want me.
How the Pied Piper went.
Oh, that's too long.
No.
Yeah. So we have to wrap this up, but I have a podcast, and I want him to come on as a guest on my podcast, so we will get that story. I will get him to tell us.
So unique and so beautiful.
I will, yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Well, what an honor and what a privilege. I know that I could listen to these stories all night long. A POW going AWOL, a knife approached to a carrier with only enough gas for one try, and there was a little consternation. You, sir, have been so delightful to listen to this evening. And from the bottom of my heart and from all of us, thank you for taking the time to spend with us. And I know, Commander Everett Alvarez, that you're not willing to ask for money, but there's another purpose for us being here tonight. You heard David Seymour talk about how they're donating 200 million miles to ensure that every one of our POWs and heroes, plus their significant others, have an opportunity to go to this 50th dinner. We need to make sure that we have the transportation, that we have the hotels, and that we have the dignity and the honor that you, sir, have deserved. So tonight, our ask is that you help make that come true, and that you make the contribution. Every night at our 100 beds, we write a check for an organization that inspires us. I hope that you have been inspired tonight by Commander Alvarez. The checks can be made out to non-POWs. We'll collect them tonight. In addition, we have an EFT routing number as well. Please take a picture of that. And then lastly, Venmo. They don't have Venmo set up for the non-POWs group, but Randy Stillinger promised us that we can go through him and your proceeds will get exactly where they need to go. Then we absolutely will take cash. Yes, ma'am. And you can rest assured it will go to the right place. We'll give it to Dave Buffington over there. 50 years ago, our president and our nation gathered to honor the sacrifice of these brave men. Tonight, I'm asking you to do the same. Do the best you can. Bend but don't break. We can't thank you enough, sir. Thank you. I'd like to hand it over to Randy Sillinger for just a few more moments.
Thank you, Neil. So we, as you entered, we gave you a ticket. They're good for door prizes. We have a couple extras. If you did not get a ticket, honesty counts here. If you didn't get a ticket on your way in, raise your hand, and we get some lovely ladies to go up front. We're going to do door prizes in a couple minutes. We do have a couple of gifts for some of our honored guests. Chloe, would you come up here, please?
And while Chloe comes up, we'll be gathering your checks and your donations. Our volunteer team will be walking up and down the aisles to collect your donations. Thank you very much.
Chloe's coming up here and making a presentation to the lovely Mrs. Alvarez. Yay. There you go. Thank you very much, Chloe. That's just a small appreciation for joining us. Miriam,